One of my favorite topics this year and probably going forward is return to work and what the implications are for the office markets. Just to give you some context, pre-COVID, about 5% of US office employees work from home, and that essentially means 3 days a week or more. During COVID, I would say that number is probably 60%, 70%. Certainly, I work from home. Little fun fact, I actually worked last year from India for almost 4 months. I would get up at, I would start work at 6 in the evening, work on till 2. So I took remote work or work from home to the extreme. But I think it's a very, very important debate because I think COVID has accelerated both employees and employers' views on how the work environment should evolve. Employees for sure want flexibility. We're not saying that office is dead. Nobody wants to go to office. That's not the case. But we do think that return to work accelerates. So as I said, pre-COVID, about 5% of office-using employees work from home. We think that can triple in the next few years. That has implications for the office markets, fundamentals, new supply, etc. So one of the reports we took out recently was called Know When to Fold. And that part of the title goes to my love for poker. I'm an avid poker player, not great at it, but while I don't know when to fold in poker, I do have a good sense of when the time to come to take chips off the table in office land is. And the two things we focused on in our recent report is what is the impact of return to work longer term, which I'm happy to get into. And second, what is the impact of cyclical slowdown that we're seeing? As I mentioned, our chief economist is seeing a slowdown. So what are the impacts of these two factors on office REITs and valuation? While I'm really negative on core office, I really like the co-working product. I truly think it's WeWork in particular is the one name we launched on recently with a buy rating and a $9 price target. It's a name I think is an undervalued expression of this changing environment where both employees and employers are rethinking their work profiles. Employers in particular are rethinking two things. One is the size of their footprint. Do we need a certain amount of space across the US and across the globe? Do we need as big of a headquarters in New York City, for example? The other thing they're thinking about, what format do we own or lease this space in? Is it a long-term lease or could it be a shorter 1 to 3 year lease term? And that's where we think WeWork comes in. Our analysis of the TAM or the total addressable market for co-working is that the TAM can grow by 50% over the next 3 years. That's a big opportunity for WeWork, even if the market share is stable for WeWork. So one, I think the TAM is large. Two, I think WeWork caters to this changing work preference. And essentially, WeWork can cater to smaller clients and large clients. The average square footage of a WeWork property is about 50,000 feet. That compares to maybe 20 or 30,000 that the competitors offer. And so WeWork, I think, offers a good barbell, being able to cater to the mom and pop client as well as the large enterprise client, the Amazons, the Facebooks of the world that may want temporary space or just want space in a flexible model. But really the last reason why we like WeWork is we think the company has pricing power, especially as it hits its 80% occupancy. It's about 70% today. As it trends towards 80, we think pricing power comes into focus, and we think that alleviates a lot of those concerns. So return to work is also interesting from the perspective of geography. During COVID, we saw a lot of people migrate out to the Sun Belt, to the suburbs, maybe move back to their parents' homes. And then recently we've seen this comeback into major cities. New York as an example, apartment rents are through the roof. My own rent, the asking rent is now up 30%. I don't know if I'll stay there, but trying to negotiate, use my own real estate skills to get a better rent. But I think it's an interesting question where there was a view that suburban office will do well. What we've actually found is that corporates are not thinking suburban as much, even though employees are distributed around multiple suburbs in New York, for example. I think the view is, one, let's maintain a central footprint in New York City. It's accessible, public transport is great. But then let's think about low-cost markets. So for the average tenant in New York, for example, office costs could be maybe 7% of revenue. It's not as high as in retail, where retailers could be paying 10 to 20% of revenue, but it still is an impact on the bottom line, especially if they can shave off 100 basis points. So let's say they decide we can move to Nashville. or Austin and shave off costs. I think that's really in focus, is how do we maintain a central office hub in main markets like New York and San Francisco, but also start expanding in other markets where the cost of occupancy and the cost of labor is more reasonable. Real estate is a fascinating asset class. It forces you to touch multiple industries. I'll talk a little bit about Amazon and warehouses, but covering industrial REITs, for example, forces me to think about the flow of goods across the U.S., the ports in the U.S., where supply chains are getting impacted, and what that may mean for warehouse demand. But real estate has just been a fascinating experience for me over the last 15 plus years. I actually got into real estate by chance. An uncle of mine suggested I apply at Colliers International. My first job was an appraiser, and I would say there was no looking back from there. I just loved valuing all sorts of properties, from hotels to offices and TV towers. With Jones Lang LaSalle, I did a lot of consulting work for both foreign and domestic investors looking to put money into real estate. And then post my MBA, it was really funny. I thought I would never go back to real estate, but it so happened my skills and an offer that came up prior to Mizuho was one where there was a real estate analyst role, and I just grew from there. So I've worn different hats. One as an appraiser, a consultant, and now for a long time an equity research analyst. But I just love real estate. As I said, it forces you to think macro, micro, debt, and equity. And it's super exciting. And in this market, with all the various themes going around, whether it's e-commerce, return to work like we've talked about, aging, the silver tsunami, there's just a lot of debates and interesting ways to express your views in real estate.